Hi everybody, Nick the Record Lover here. It's Saturday night. It's 8:43, August 20th. How you all feeling tonight? Feeling all right? Hope you're feeling all right. I'm feeling pretty good. It's Saturday. I'm glad I'm home. Relaxation. Tonight I thought I'd make a little video as a companion to my podcast about musical observations. Now I just watched a podcast, or should I say, listen to a podcast on YouTube, a video log, a vlog of the Nostalgia Critic doing a critique of Pink Floyd's The Wall, the movie. And when I initially listened to it, I thought it was just going to be a straight out review of the album itself. I mean, the movie itself. And it wasn't. Actually, it went on to be a parody complete with all different nightmare allusions from the film and all that. And to my surprise, after listening to it, it was a parody. Now, I really didn't listen to the whole thing. In a way, I was disappointed that it just wasn't a straight out review of the movie and how he felt about it. Now, there was a lot of backlash about it for him, and rightfully so. According to the many Pink Floyd fans that answered it, yeah, I guess so. From my point of view, if he didn't like it, he didn't like it. Plain and simple. I mean, The Wall, I'll tell you something about an experience. When the movie came out in 1980, all right, along with the album, the cassette, I saw the commercial for The Wall. And I remember the face with the screaming mouth coming out of the wall and staying there on screen. Another brick in the wall. You know, The Wall, Pink Floyd, The Wall. In theaters now, rated R. And I was like, please get that picture off the screen. It's scaring me. This is crazy. And even in the Daily News, the New York Daily News, I was 10 years old. I saw the ad for The Wall, and it had the same thing. The head coming out of the wall screaming. It was a time I was watching a basketball game with my dad, and it was the Sixers, and it was midnight. It was a late game, and a commercial came on, and all I heard was "Another Brick in the Wall," the song, and all the images from the inside of the cover. I actually, saw the inside of the cover from a local neighborhood friend at the time who had the album with all the little talking little mushrooms, if you will, whatever they are. You see the one picture of the inside of the album cover, another shot of the inside of the album cover, and you hear "Another Brick in the Wall" in the background. And it's like the last 10 seconds of the commercial that there's a voiceover which says Pink Floyd, The Wall, their new album on Columbia Records and Tapes. I was like, whoa, that's pretty deep. But then again, it was a late night. It was after 10:30. So maybe they figured the kids would be asleep and they wouldn't see that. But I was 10. Well, I was up anyway. It didn't matter. It was the summertime. I think it was just a Saturday night and I was just up. So that was pretty scary. I mean, and I saw they were talking about it on the news at the time. And I think they were talking to Roger Waters. And they said, why did you make a film like this? Why did the group make a film like this? And he said, well, I guess, everybody's got a dark side to them. And I was like, all right, I guess so. But they kept on showing scenes from the film with the guy's head blasting out of the wall every single time in the nightmare sequences. And I'm saying, okay, well, people are going to have their opinions about that. They're going to have opinions about the wall. People are going to. I didn't see too many negative. Well, I mean, I should say, people that were in agreement with the Nostalgia Critic about Pink Floyd's The Wall. But it was all, and people made videos that were attacking his video. And he responded to that by saying, look, I grew up watching this movie. I love this movie. He says, it's better for me that people are actually answering me. He said, than not saying anything at all. And, like they say in, entertainment, bad publicity is good publicity, or there's no such thing as bad publicity. So, I mean, you could cause controversy by saying that the wall was a piece of crap, Dark Side of the Moon is the most overrated album there is, along with I think a couple of Zeppelin albums, except for the first one, which I have here. It's an original 1969 copy with the original Atlantic sleeve inside, and it's the original green and orange Atlantic label. Has all the albums that were out in 1969. Cover in shrink wrap. Back in 1969, this was $1.98 list price, but it was $1.57 on sale. $1.57 for a stereo album in 1969. This had to have come out. This had to have come out of a five and dime store. Because if this was Sam Goody, this would be like $3.98, $4.98. But I digress. Anyway, I think the best Pink Floyd is their first album. That's why I think the best Led Zeppelin. If I ever get my hands on the copy of the second one, maybe I would enjoy that too. But Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn I think is their best because it's psychedelic. It's Syd Barrett, and it's it's their psych pop era. Kind of I wouldn't say British Invasion because it was 1967, and they were playing in a club in San Francisco where all the psych bands played, and the Velvet Underground would play there. Sometimes the Byrds, I think, would play there. But that's where my taste is, and I have the 3 CD German box set of Piper at the Gates of Dawn. It's a 3 CD set with the mono CD, the stereo CD, and then a CD with just like singles, outtakes, alternate takes, things like that, which I think was a good way to get it because I don't have the LP on vinyl, and it's very hard to find on Tower Records in virtually any nice shape, even if it's in good condition, for less than $100. So, because it's very rare on both Tower labels. One is the bright red one, and the other one is like all the stripes, like a candy cane kind of thing, or stripes up and down, red and orange and green, and all of that. And I actually did see one in Princeton Record Exchange with that kind of label on it, and I think they still wanted like $5, but the thing was chewed up. It looks like they gave the cover to a dog, and they did something, and the record was just like literally drawn on, and they still wanted $5 for it. I'm like, dude, this is a frisbee with cardboard on it, and that's what it is for me. But getting back to what I was saying before, I think, I listened to the Nostalgia Critics version of The Wall, and he was doing parodies of the songs and parodies of the scenes using his crew and his actors and actresses and producers to do a parody. And he said it was a parody. He said he grew up watching the film and loving the film. He's like, I don't take this to heart at all. That people are making videos about my videos, but there are people. I mean, you'd think it was Armageddon the way they answered him. I'm like, come on already. I mean, yeah, maybe this all has some of this album has a meaning to everybody, but I mean, it's freaking scary. It is. When I was in high school, I mean, he said that the movie wound up in the cutout bin. I don't think that's true either. Even the album didn't. The album was a big seller. I mean, I knew guys in the neighborhood, 10 years old, just like me, that had the album on cassette. I was going to say CD, but caught myself. On a cassette, and they were blasting it on the stereo, if you will. The big cassette stereos at the time. And hearing the song Mother with Mother, Do You Think They'll Try to Break My Balls? It was like the big laughing thing, it was a big joke. And I'm like, oh my God, they said that on a record. I'm like, we'll leave it to Pink Floyd. But, did I like the album? No. Did I buy the album? No. Do I like maybe one or two songs that I've heard on the radio? I like Another Brick in the Wall Part 1. Part 1 is the long version. Part 2 is the short version. Why they say it's Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 is the long version. The long version is Part 1. Part 2 is the single. Part 2 is just, it starts off with We Don't Need No Education. Not the whole thing about the teachers growing up in school and then the scream and then the, the song. And then if you don't eat your meat, can't have any pudding, at the end. But, because that was a big joke to me, that whole thing. I used to yell that all the time. If you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding. How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat? It was a joke. I never saw anything deep in it, but it was just like, about the cruelty of teachers and about the cruelty of what school could be, and how Roger Waters and his fellow bandmates went to school and had their hands hit with a ruler. But in Catholic school, they did that too. Um, I know about that kind of stuff. So, you know, Catholic school, when I was a kid, they pulled no punches at Catholic school either. And this is about a place that's supposed to be talking about God. So let's not even go there. Get religious about it. So I don't think that, well, as far as a parody goes, I think that, you know, Frank Zappa came out and made a parody of Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band called We're Only in It for the Money. Making a joke that people were only in it on that picture for the money. A lot of people wanted to be on it, you know. He made a parody of it. Okay, I'm a big Beatle fan, but I'm not going to go all over social media and say what an idiot Frank Zappa was for doing it, or Frank Zappa just didn't get it, or Frank Zappa didn't understand. Frank Zappa claimed that he wanted to exploit what bullshit that the Summer of Love was, and people lived during that time with hope that things could have been more peaceful during the 1960s instead of the Vietnam War, instead of racial segregation, you know. And John Lennon said we had a lot of hope during that summer that things could have changed, even though we didn't get everything we wanted. Paul McCartney even said, I wouldn't call it the summer of love. I'd call it the golden summer or a golden summer, but I wouldn't call it the summer of love. I mean, people who lived through it were like, okay, but we're in Vietnam. This is the music is giving us hope. That things could have happened, that things could be good, and we don't have to fight with each other. We're all equal. But Zappa wanted to exploit that as no, it's nobody felt that way. I'm like, oh, I wasn't there in 1967, so I can't really say for sure. But you know, uh, to do a parody, I mean, I'm not going to take offense at that. You know, um, they did a parody of Frank Zappa in 200 Motels. Now, I tried to listen to Frank Zappa's music. Don't like it. I just don't like it. I said to a friend of mine in the family, I said, "Did you ever see Yellow Submarine?" Yeah. What'd you think? Didn't like it. Why? I just didn't like it. End of conversation. I didn't say anymore. You didn't like it. That's it. I'm not going to say, well, maybe you didn't understand it when you saw it, or you didn't get the symbolism of the Blue Meanies that they were evil and the Beatles were good, and good always beats evil and blah blah blah. I didn't get into anything. You don't like it. You don't like it. You didn't see it. You didn't see it. That's fine with me. There are people who aren't Beatles fans. Don't offend me at all. you know, People who went through the '60s didn't like the Beatles, even though they grew up during the time as kids with the music being out. Some people don't like their music. I mean, I'm a fan. There are a lot of fans out there. A lot. It's just putting it mildly. But I can't say any more about. I mean, the 200 Motels. I had to zip through a lot of that on YouTube because I didn't understand what Ringo Starr was doing in that film. Besides playing Frank Zappa and doing a parody of Frank Zappa. But and even, Howard Kalin and Mark Volman from the Turtles were in it, who wound up being part of the Mothers of Invention after the Turtles broke up. But they were the biggest hippies that there were. So I didn't get it. I mean, Frank Zappa turned 30 in 1970 when he made that, and they were making fun of how he was turning 30, which is nothing. So, you know, maybe back then it was, but people look at it now, it's like, oh my God, he was so young, But like I said, a lot of stuff that the Beatles did solo project choice for me. Like I saw pictures of Ringo Starr and scenes with Ringo Starr in that film. Yeah, okay. I rented a film that Ringo Starr did called "That'll Be the Day," where he plays a rocker, where it's the 1950s and he's got the sideburns and it's during the Buddy Holly era, or late 50s, early 60s, and he shaved his mustache and his beard, to look like Ringo Starr in the early days again. I saw it once. I was like, okay. I rented it. All right. Yeah. Weird. It. Saw that. I have the movie Candy that he was in with Awa Owen, who was a Swedish actress at the time, up and coming, but unfortunately she didn't go anywhere in the United States after that film. But I have it. I don't watch it as much as I used to. I actually only watched it once. I have to say, because when you watch it, when I first watched it, I think I was about 35, 36 years old. And when I paused it to have to go inside for a minute to get something, I was like, is my brain still inside my head? Because I wasn't sure when I paused it. So I'm like, yeah, Ringo's in it, but it's like, and Caveman I did not see either. So I'm just saying that to make a point, not everything I agree with them solo wise. There's a lot of people who like go, oh my God, sometime in New York City by John Lennon and the Plastic Ono Band is like, oh my, bow to it. Oh, I can't wait till that album comes out in the deluxe set. I'm like, I can wait till Kingdom Come for that to come out, and and I still wouldn't buy it. It's like, well, maybe this should be in my collection because it's a John Lennon album. It's on Apple. It's on the original Apple label. Blah blah blah. But it's all it is political. And then there's a live jam with Frank Zappa. And to this day, he, till the end of days for him, he was still mad at Lennon, and so was Howard Kalin. I mean, he's mad because Zappa never saw the money for it. Well, there's one reason why he never saw it. It was Yoko Ono. So that's it. And if people are going to deny that, then believe what you want to believe. So that goes along with the old quote of, if you don't love Yoko, you don't love John. Well, I've already spoken my piece on that last year in a couple of podcasts. So for people to take like you just let your air out of somebody's tire, for making a parody on The Wall, the movie by Pink Floyd, there were so many responses to that with people's own videos about it, and I was like, wow. I mean, talk about publicity this guy gets. And it's like, well, people were saying, I used to watch this guy. Now he just thinks he's full of himself and he can do anything he wants. Well, I mean, when you sometimes I think after a while, when you get so many responses, you're like, okay, well, I'm getting responses. I did my job. You know, I mean, I read a book, and it's a great book. Bruce Spicer writes a lot about the Beatle albums, the Beatles 45s, beautiful books. And the one I got for Christmas was the Beatles' Yellow Submarine and Magical Mystery Tour. He talks about both of the albums together, Magical Mystery Tour first and Yellow Submarine. The backs of the album covers, the insides, the inside of Magical Mystery Tour, the booklet. When Yellow Submarine came out, what did people think of the film? What did they think of the album? Some people liked the album, some people didn't because it wasn't all Beatles music. Side two was George Martin incidental music from the film. But they've since rectified that with the Yellow Submarine song track that came out in 1999, where they remixed every song that was in the movie. Even though it was like only snippets of Baby You're a Rich Man, they put the entire Baby You're a Rich Man on the Yellow Submarine song track. When they first issued Yellow Submarine on CD, it didn't have, or the original album didn't have all of those songs. It had like a handful, and only three of them were new. Only a Northern Song, Hey Bulldog, and It's All Too Much. The short version of It's All Too Much, or the 6.5 minute version of it. But Hey Bulldog's a classic, and so is Only a Northern Song, which is actually written during the Sgt. Pepper sessions. Excuse me. But I like the book. I love the book. I mean, any Bruce Spicer Beatles book, if you could get your hands on, is really good. I heard that Revolver and Rubber Soul are next. He's going to talk about both of them, and possibly to come out in October of this year. So possible Christmas present. And there was and they don't only put positive sides of it in the 60s. They put some pans in there as well. From people that didn't really care for it. People that saw Magical Mystery Tour, it was shown in black and white on BBC TV on Boxing Day 1967. Why it was released in black and white was a mystery. Why they did that. To save money, probably. Most likely. I mean, to film in color even in 1967 was expensive. But John Lennon said it was like somebody doing a mono review of a stereo album, doing that. Because there's so much color to see in that film that they actually did it right in January of 68, like the first week of January in 68, the BBC broadcast it again in color the way it was originally shot, but it still didn't make a difference. It didn't. It didn't even make a dent when they put it out. When they put it out in color. Now, a lot of people pan the film, but love the music. I have the film. I have the Blu-ray box set with the ticket, with the book, with the EP, and I watched the movie, and I'm like, okay, there's a silly scene in there with Victor Spinetti, with Paul McCartney, and he's doing those kind of hey, hop, 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 2, 3, 4, hop, two, all that, and they go outside and they see a paper mache bull, and I'm like, okay, I don't know where this came from, but I guess they just did it on the spur of the moment. Okay, well, fine. It was the Beatles making a film. It wasn't, you know, John Frankenheimer filming them. It wasn't Peter Jackson filming them. So it was the Beatles doing their own thing. You know, Brian Epstein had just passed away, but Paul just kept the guys going, which a lot of people said he did, and I'll agree with that to a point. But Magical Mystery Tour is probably one of my favorite albums, and it's a good movie. It's Beatles, but 1967 Beatles. It was different. The song, the production numbers in it are really good. I mean, flying. When you look out the window and you see the sky going by, and Fool on a Hill with Paul McCartney on the hill in that scene, and the music, and you know, and the Blue Jay Way production number is amazing. Even the Blu-ray, I think you see more footage in it. Because I don't remember certain footage when I first saw it on VHS. Maybe it was there and I wasn't really paying attention, or they just added it in later on in Blue Jay Way. But I think it was really good. It was a fantasy. It was a fantasy film. You had to take it for what it was. It was an hour television special, 53 minutes is what it was, and it didn't do very well. Uh, Rex Reed, a big journalist at the time, he said he listened to the album and the album itself, and he said, "I would not spend I would not spend $6 on this drivel." Well, stereo album was $6. I think a lot of people bought the stereo copy more than the mono copy because a lot of people who wrote articles about it at that time said you need to listen to this in stereo, not mono. But mono is very different. With that album is, well, very different. Not as very different as Sergeant Pepper's is in mono, but Magical Mystery Tour in mono has its moments, has its nuances that the stereo doesn't have, vice versa. But some people loved it. Some people loved the Magical Mystery Tour album. And yeah, it is a great album. And Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane belong on Magical Mystery Tour on side two with the other singles that came out in 1967. It's a perfect album that Capitol released. One side from the film, the 6 songs, and the other side, the singles between February of 1967 and November of 1967. And Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane do not belong on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I mean, Giles Martin could agree with his father. George Martin said that to the day he went to the day he went to the Lord. That the biggest mistake he made was not putting those 2 songs on the album and screwing the idea of putting them out as a single for Parlophone and Capitol in the United States to put them out. But it didn't matter with Capitol in the United States. They put songs out on singles and they put the same thing on albums. So it didn't matter if it got the song twice or 3 times. But George Martin, regretted to his dying day that he didn't have those 2 songs on Sgt. Pepper's. In my opinion, those songs would not fit anywhere on that album. They'd say, well, maybe Strawberry Fields Forever could have taken the place of She's Leaving Home. No, it just wouldn't. And Penny Lane and putting maybe Strawberry Fields Forever at the end of a day in the life, or Penny Lane at the end of a day in the life, after that long piano chord, that would have been a big mistake to do that, because you're hearing the piano chord that lasted how long, and then you hear Ringo getting up from the chair, it's squeaking at the end. You really have to put your ear to the speaker to hear it, but those would not have fit on that album at all. Neither one of them. They're bonus tracks on the 2017 50th anniversary. That's nice, and they also have the single version of Penny Lane, the promo single with the horns at the end. But it's recorded from a 45. It's not the master copy. It's not a master mono mix with that at the end. It's somebody took a mono 45 and just put it on there, and it was like, okay, I have the same thing, but I have bootleg, and I two bootlegs of it on with the horn um, at the end, the piccolo trumpet at the end, and played by David Mason. And there are going to be people's opinions about stuff. I mean, people are gonna like stuff. People are not going to like stuff. Here's a perfect example. While I go into my book of tricks here, if you will, book of tricks, if I can find the tricks. Let's see here. Sweet. No, that's not what I want to talk about. This is what I want to talk about here. Mardi Gras. There you go. See, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Mardi Gras. Okay, this has been panned by everybody and their mother. Okay, I love this album. I think it's a great album. I do. I did a podcast on this too. I love it. I love this album. I think it might be the best one. I love Pendulum, but I mean, even Grill Marcus, who wrote for Cream magazine in the spring of '72 when this album came out, he said, "This is better than Pendulum." I never heard anybody say that this album was better than Pendulum. And it actually did go gold too. And it actually went top 10. Top 20, I should say top 20. It went top 20. But, for Rolling Stone magazine to call it the worst album by a rock and roll band, no, that's please, I could think of a heck of a lot more albums by a rock and roll band that are terrible. And should have quit while they were ahead. But, I love this record. People could say, people have podcasts about Mardi Gras and they hate it. They don't think the other three that Doug Clifford and Stu Cook, could carry a tune in a bucket. But I have a completely different feeling about this album, and it's my go-to Creedence album. I love "Sail Away." I love "Door to Door." I love "I Need Someone to Hold." That's just a point I'm making, that it's different strokes for different folks. I understand that. The thing is with Led Zeppelin, as I was showing the first copy before, is that I got this, like I would say in this past year, I bought this album. And I made conversation with somebody one day. And I said, I just bought the first Led Zeppelin album, and it's an original copy and all of that. And the person said to me, "Have you been living under a rock?" I'm like, "What is that supposed to mean?" They're like, "Well, I mean, everybody has that record." Well, not everybody did when I was in school. I didn't have it. So, I mean, in high school, it was Led Zeppelin or it was Pink Floyd, or nobody wanted to talk to you. So I wasn't a Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd fan then. Maybe if the music wasn't shoved down my throat, I might have listened to it for myself. And I did get Houses of the Holy for my 21st birthday, and I'm like, eh. And then, the CD wasn't even that great. It was like from second or third generation master tapes. Same thing with In Through the Outdoor. So I wound up even like donating them because they didn't even sound that good. Now, what I might in the way future look for a paper bag copy of In Through the Outdoor with the original picture that you put the sponge on, possibly. Am I a fan of all those songs? I love "Fool in the Rain." I think it's the best Led Zeppelin song ever that they did commercially. I think this I think is a good album because it's got blues, a little bit of psychedelic on it, and I like it. I do, and I thought it was a good idea to get it because it's their first album, it's a debut, and I enjoyed it very much. But the deal is, for people are going to have opinions on social media, a lot, and a lot of that you got to take with a dab of salt, and sometimes you got to grow a thick skin, to absorb, what people say about stuff. Some people say Sgt. Pepper's is an overrated Beatles album, or that um, you know Dark Side of the Moon is the most has sold the most copies of any album. And I mean, there's a lot of people. I know I got a lot of friends that love that album, and I'm just like, it just didn't do anything for me. It's like, I'm not going to disrespect somebody for loving that album, but I mean, that album has been released in so many different formats, in so many different mixes and pressings, and with stickers in it, with this in it, with that in it, mobile fidelity, UHQR maybe, ultra high quality. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if it's been released on that, but it may have been, and I probably wouldn't be wrong if I said that it was. So, but I have seen mobile fidelity. Excuse me, something on my eye. Mobile fidelity Sound Lab of it. I have seen those copies. They go for a pretty penny, and I'm sure an original copy on Harvest from 1973 goes, sealed, especially, would probably, like name your price. I mean, but in this economy, the way it is, I don't think anybody would pay it. Well, all you need is one person to give you the money. People come in and look at it and say, "Oh my God, it's $300-400 and it's sealed and all that, blah blah blah." But all you need is one person that's a big collector or wants to buy it and trade it for something else, and you're in like Flynn. So if you're a dealer, but my deal is those are my observations because not everybody's going to like what everybody likes. I just think that, you know, when I post my podcasts, I've had constructive criticism because I've only made 8 of them or 7. I think I'm looking at my 8th for my next one. But this is a video I wanted to make tonight and just give you guys some perspective. Um, there are people that do album reviews all the time. There are people that say this is the worst album, this is the best album. There's a group called Klaatu that everybody thought was the Beatles when they did their first album in 1976, 1977, just a self-titled one. Um, and they thought it was the Beatles because there was no picture of the group on the front. All it said in the parentheses, it didn't even give credits to the songwriters. All it said in parentheses after every song on the label was Klaatu, just written by the group. They wanted, people thought it was the Beatles with calling occupants of interplanetary craft. They thought it was the Beatles. They thought it was Paul McCartney, or they thought it was John singing it. They didn't want to put themselves out there on a personal level because they wanted the people to hear the music. They wanted to be known for the music, not personal appearances. They just wanted to be heard, and they were heard. And it was Capitol's hidden secret, or maybe it was a joke. They said it was the biggest joke that Capitol Records pulled on the subject because it made everybody think it was the Beatles under a different name. And really, it was a group from Canada that did it. And I have all of their albums on CD. Not all of them. I am missing Magenta Lean. That's what I'm missing. And the only way you could get that, it's a Canadian press. It's the Pink album. And I actually did hear it in a record store. It was in the shrink wrap. It was $15. And I wasn't really in the market for it. And I thought it was too much money to spend just on one thing. So I left it there and I went there the following week. And to my surprise, or not my surprise, the record was gone. Somebody bought it. And I've looked online and it's gone for a ridiculous amount of astronomical prices. So, even on CD, it's like $65. And I heard it and I like the music on it. And but some people say that with the album Endangered Species, Klaatu released, uh, it had the song Dear Christine on it. And Dear Christine is a beautiful song. Now, some people think that Klaatu sold out with Endangered Species. They like the first album. They like We're Off. They like Hope, or they may like Sir Army Suit. That one. So I have those, but Magenta Lane is the only one I'm missing. And down the line, I'm sure I could find it. I'm never going to stop looking for that. So I just have to say that people think that certain albums are sellouts, and I loved it. I have a friend who posts album covers and talks about the albums on social media and says this album hardly anybody even liked, and I love it. I don't know why everybody had a problem with this record. I don't know why people had a problem with Endangered Species by Klaatu. You know, people had a problem with Ram by Paul and Linda McCartney. They thought it was rubbish. A lot of people. Hey, Uncle Albert out of Halsey went to number 1, and also I think so did Ram. So, and that's my favorite Paul McCartney album. So, I don't know. People have saying that Venus and Mars is underrated, completely overrated. Overrated? When's the last time you heard anything on the radio from that album? You don't even listen to what the man said anymore. Never mind the long intro before the song starts from the Venus and Mars album. You never even hear that. You don't even hear Rock Show. You don't hear any of it. None of it. You don't hear Love and Song. You don't hear Spirits of Ancient Egypt. Nothing. No mainstream classic rock radio station plays any of those songs. I've only heard Junior's Farm which is not obscure, but it's a single that was only a single and only appeared on greatest hits collections from Paul McCartney and Wings. That was requested once on a work break on a local radio station here. That they do like a lunch break at 12 o'clock, and they go to somebody's office or whatever, and this guy wanted Junior's Farm by Paul McCartney and Wings. That's the last time I ever heard that song on the radio, ever, unless you go to a Sirius Satellite or you go to Spotify or you buy the original 45, which I have like 3 or 4 copies of because it's probably my favorite song by them on single. But those are my observations for tonight. And I just hope that you will enjoy this video and take my opinions with a grain of salt because, not everything I say is gospel. I'll admit that. I have opinions, and it's just I have different albums in my collection. I have different styles and genres, and it's there's things that I've never heard. There are things, or the things that many people have heard that are new to me. And I said that the other night when I posted a video on Facebook when I went live, and I talked about Who's Next. A lot of people love that album. I never heard it. I only heard a couple of songs from it. I only heard Bob O'Reilly, and I only heard "Won't Get Fooled Again" and "Going Mobile." Those are the songs that I knew from that album, and "Behind Blue Eyes," just the hits off of it. I didn't know the entire 9-song album, and it's amazing that that album is only 9 songs long. I have the CD, which has extra, it's 7 bonus tracks on it. And some of the bonus tracks, well, most of the bonus tracks, they're all good. I mean, a lot of them, well, quite a few of them are like long jams that they did. Um, but I think maybe 1 or 2 could have made the original album. But I think the original 9-track album is fine the way it is. Uh, but that was an album that was new to me. Uh, a lot of people, love Who's Next. It might be, in their collection is like it's like Live at Leeds. Now, for example, I bought Live at Leeds with everything in it, a fully loaded The Who Live at Leeds LP with all of the trimmings inside, all the contracts, the letters, the posters, the pictures, the 8x10 photos, all 11 pieces of memorabilia are in it, or ephemera, like they like to call it. But that's all. I have that, and then I bought another copy, which has only about 8 pieces in there. But one of them has a sticker that says the best live album ever made. And that was from the New York Times, not Rolling Stone magazine, but the New York Times. Now, I haven't heard the whole thing yet. In fact, I might haven't heard it at all. I heard a couple tracks. Maybe I heard like the beginning of Magic Bus. Now, they say it's the best live album ever. I took a chance on it. I spent $18 with everything in it. Nice looking copy. And I have one with a sticker on it that's the best live LP ever made, probably after it got really popular. Because the first one I have doesn't have that sticker. But it was a fun piece, and like I said, Who's Next? I was able to get a copy on Decca and an original copy, and then I started buying stuff like the Who by Numbers and Who's Next, and It's Hard by the Who, and stuff like that. I start to enjoy it. I mean, as I've grown older and just look at the experience different things, that people have said, oh, you never heard this? Oh, wow, And then, I'm the same way. It's like, have you ever heard the Bee Gees Odessa? And they're like, no, what's that? I said, well, it's when they were like an English rock band, when they were making concept albums and everything. The British, well, 69 wasn't really, 68 wasn't the British invasion with the Bee Gees, but they kind of came on the cusp, 66, 67 with their first album. Bee Gees first, actually, 1967. And I actually had a friend listen to a song from an album called 2 Years On, which was released in 1971, but was recorded the year before, a song called A Man for All Seasons. And she heard it, and she said, oh, my God, I didn't know that was the Bee Gees. I would have known if you didn't tell me. I said, they didn't start with Saturday Night Fever. They didn't start there. There's a lot of stuff between 1967 and 1974 that the Bee Gees put out that is criminally overlooked. And with that, maybe that's for another video. Maybe that's for another podcast. We'll see, shall we? That's my thoughts tonight, August 20th, 2022. So we'll call this like Musical Observations Part 2, only in video format. Have a great night, guys. Enjoy the music and peace.